Hello, this is Andrew Osio, and here's another mini lecture on how to make a real rocket with particles. Usually when we're working with dynamics and visual effects, we're just pretending. We're just using whatever's available within the effects engines to kind of simulate certain things, but you can actually make real things that actually work. And one of the simple ones is a real rocket. This is just mostly kind of a fun little thing to kind of show your friends. So I'm going to take a sphere here, and I'm just going to make it stretched out just a little bit like that, and I'm going to delete the bottom half. There we go. There's my rocket, believe it or not. And I'll be nice enough to delete the history. It's usually a good idea to delete history and freeze the transformation so you just have pure geometry without any extra nodes attached to it. Makes the dynamics a lot easier. So from here, I'm going to make some particles. So we're going to switch to dynamics, and I'm just going to make a standard emitter, which is by default Omni. And we're going to open up our animation to about 1,000 frames. So there goes the particles, and that's kind of our jet fuel, but we're going to actually make it work with the object. So what we're going to do here is we're going to take this object, and it's going to be dynamic, so dynamic objects are usually rigid body objects, so we're going to make this what we call an active rigid body. Like that. And then we're going to have the particles actually create some thrust for us by bouncing off of this rocket engine bell, so to speak. So to do that, you select particles first, and then the sphere, and then go particles, make collide. So let's just do a quick test on that to see if it's actually working. Yeah, and indeed the particles that are shooting up are actually bouncing off the object and bouncing down. Pretty straightforward, really. Now, when you have an object that's a rigid body, you can actually get it to respond to particle collisions. So with the object selected, and we're going to just go to the rigid body tab in the channel box, spin down here to where it says particle collisions, and type on the word on, so it actually responds. That way when it collides, it actually responds as if it's a real object. So let's do a test. And it responds in a big way because by default each particle has a mass of 1, but so does the rigid body. So we also have to create the mass and make it a little higher. So I'm just going to make a mass of like 20, let's say. Let's see what that happens. Okay, nice. Now that's great. Basically I have a little explosion here, and it takes the rigid body and takes it into the air. So here's the last trick though. If I take this object emitter and group it under the geometry, then wherever the rocket goes is going to take the emitter with it, and therefore the particle thrust. So now if we do our little run, get a little object making a little rocket. And basically the object should continue to grow all the way up until it runs out of particles. So we can actually test that out by going back to the emitter and have it run out of gas. So let's say after about frame 200 we're going to run out of gas. So we're just going to scrub quickly to frame 200. Simulation is not accurate when you scrub, but that's not important at this point. And we're just going to click on the rate, highlight it, right mouse click and keyframe that value, and then tab 1 frame over to frame 201, and then I'm going to set the rate to 0. By setting the rate to 0, you effectively turn the emitter off. So no emitter, no particles, no rocket fuel, and our rocket isn't going to go very far. So let's give it a test. Nice. Well, why is our rocket still moving? Well, that's because there's no gravity to pull it down. It's kind of in space. So let's do that. Let's select the object and give it a gravity field. So it's a rigid body. We're going to go to Fields and add a gravity field. Now by default, the way we set it up, the gravity field is probably going to be too strong. Particles can't fight against the gravity field, so we're going to make it a really light gravity field, just 1 magnitude. In fact, we'll make it a tiny gravity field, maybe about just 0.3. And we could fight this basically a little more, making more particles and push it higher, but by making the magnitude light, it's enough to kind of get the object going. So there we go, it's pushing up, and then it runs out of energy and it falls back to the ground. So that's kind of like a simple little rocket demo that you can do easily and amaze your friends.